Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Techies. I'm Vance Willis.
And I'm Mark Johnson.
So on this week's show, we pick up on some items from where we left last week. We talk about the Pi having some delay, the iPad 3 or the new iPad, and a lot of other stuff. So Mark, glad that you could join me today, as always.
It's great. I can't believe we're at episode 4 of this, and I really enjoy it. I thought we'd kick off with something that actually my wife mentioned to me, and then suddenly there was a lot of fuss over here. And I don't know whether you had heard about it, but that's in the US, some people going for job interviews are being asked to provide their login details for social networks, for Facebook, etc. And that really, to me at least, seems a pretty much an invasion of privacy. Has it hit the headlines over there, or is it just here in Blighty that it's been talked about?
No, most certainly it has. In fact, it's been a big uproar, and I don't know if you've been following it just recently within the last few hours, but I think within the last 12 or 15 hours, Facebook came out with a statement saying that any employers that require that on a basis of employment, they will sue the employer.
Wow!
There was a big uproar. So I would hate to think that I was an employer that said, give me, a lot of talk radio show hosts and even some news reporters said it would be the equivalent to giving someone the keys to your house to get a job interview or a job and say, just go rummage through my safe and through all of my documents. And, it certainly has been a big uproar just in the last few days. So
I guess I could understand it if you were, I don't know, if you were trying to join the CIA or, MI5, our security services or something. I guess there could be, a good enough reason, but I guess they can probably see it anyway. But, just to ask us, as for fairly sort of normal jobs. And this was the story that I saw, and this guy refused to give it, which I thought was pretty good. I don't know whether that, I suppose if you refuse to give it, it might give the impression that you've got something to hide. But then if you know they're going to ask, don't you just create another ID on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever, and just give them that?
Sure, I would think that you would do that, but still. I think the correct answer is to just not participate. And you're exactly right. It's going to take people standing up saying, that's just pushing it too far. That's really pushing it too far. So I agree completely that, it probably needs to just say, no, I'm not going to do it. And but it was very interesting that they delayed. They actually said, we're going to sue you if you ask for that, Mr. Employer. And so I'm sure there'll be some pushback from the employers based on that. Well, one of the other things I know go ahead.
Sorry. So, one of the things that I've always said to my kids is, you have to assume that anything that you put on any of these social sites, Facebook or whatever, is effectively public, even if you have it in a closed group of friends, because I think they were saying that to go and look at on Facebook and search for people's names is sort of acceptable, and I have seen some pretty intelligent youngsters post stuff that I thought that if a potential employer ever saw, it would perhaps give them a cause for concern or for thought, and they have I think taken that on board. And also when they register on various sites, they don't use their real names, etc. And even when applying for universities, there are lots of forums, etc. And I always say, well, just be careful. Don't use your real name. and just assume that anything you post, that either your potential employer or your university or whatever can find. So privacy is very different for youngsters than for us. I think they almost assume there isn't privacy.
Well, I think that's a good point, and I think that the generation that's now coming through, higher education, just touching into it, even teenagers, middle-aged youth, have done just that, have assumed that they don't have any privacy, or they've been brought up in society that they share everything. So they don't think it's that big of a deal. Now, I think that some people are having some issues with others tagging them in pictures, whether they're in the picture or not. Obviously, Facebook allows you to tag someone even if you're not in the picture. Now, they've done some different privacy changes just recently that allows you to approve the tag before it actually goes public. But still, that you certainly have to watch out for that if that's going to be a concern for potential employers. There was a lot of comments a few years back about checking credit scores before employment. Now doing that, the employer would argue, well, if the potential new employee can manage their finances well, then they would probably be upstanding or whatever. But if they didn't, then maybe they would be someone that we wouldn't want to have as an employee. Now, obviously, if they're going to work for a bank, that's something that you would want to check to make sure that they would be honest and ethical and everything. But everyone turning in checks on on background checks for credit checks would be difficult. But you're right. Security clearances probably still obviously need to have things like security clearances, that kind of stuff need to have background checks and extensive background checks. But I don't know about Facebook. I just don't know about Facebook doing that.
No, I think you just, if you know they're going to do it, you just create another account, and you just say, or say I don't use it very much, and I've only got 3 friends or something or other. So
Right.
I just think you have to be very, very careful. I mean, we have, in some of the local groups I'm involved with here, when there are people who refuse to have their photograph put on the website, and not with their name or with their contact details or anything like that. They will not have their face, their photograph put on the website. So, and that's, people who are a little bit older, shall we say, but youngsters, they couldn't care less.
Exactly. Well, let's go on to the next topic, which is the Pi. Now, give me an update, Mark, about the Pi delay. What have you heard about the delay in the mini computer called the Pi? We've talked about it a couple of weeks in a row. So, what delay have you seen on that?
Yeah, right. Well, the Raspberry Pi, which I am still looking forward to getting, but they have had a little manufacturing problem, and this has been, they've sent out. I think my delay is about 4 weeks on my unit. What they have said is that they have 2 models, an A model and a B model. The B model has a little Ethernet jack on it, which obviously you want to connect into for the LAN, and the manufacturer in China of these devices, so there's the Ethernet thing just on the port on the right-hand side there, has fitted the wrong connector. It was not the connector that was specified in the bill of materials. It was a different connector, and it was something to do with it being a non-magnetic connector.
Right.
And the actual the pinouts aren't connecting, so they will not work. And there are 2 problems with this. Is one, that they obviously have to redo, unsolder the incorrect part, and put in a new part. And apparently they've done that on the very first batch. But the problem is that when you're making these by the million, which they are, they have placed orders, etc. And all the orders for future components coming in are for the incorrect part. So they are now having to scour, the component suppliers and trying to find, enough for the next production. And you can imagine if you just want 10 or 20 or 100 or 1,000 even, that's probably doable. But if you're ordering these things by the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, it can take a while. So my order was delayed about 4 weeks. I don't know whether that's real. I don't think they really know that it's real. But it's a real shame. But it is going to be worth waiting for. And lots of people have commented that they're going to be using it for streaming video, for dedicated controllers. And I'm certainly looking forward to playing with it here.
All right. Well, that's great. Well, I still haven't ordered one. I was going to wait until the production ramped up and there were more available and hopefully available here in the U.S. without having to do, large, shipping rates and that kind of stuff. So I'm just kind of sitting back and letting you be the tester for that, and hopefully things will work out and go with that. Now, talking about, production and delivery, the iPad 3 or the new iPad, the delivery on that. Now, I understand that you picked up a couple of them for some family members, and I think that you saw that the delivery of this unit, in contrast to the Raspberry Pi, was pretty good. I mean, what did you see at the store?
It was, and I was, I hadn't pre-ordered one because I didn't think I have an iPad 2, and I thought I can't really, I think we talked about it a couple of shows ago, I couldn't see a compelling reason for upgrading. Okay, it's got a better screen and camera, etc., but not compelling. So I didn't order one, and then as it got nearer the date, we had been talking about getting our kids who are at university an iPad each, and in the end we thought, well, if we're going to get them one, we might as well get them one now, and we'll get them the new one. Right. And as I hadn't ordered it, I thought I'll go and queue up, and I thought this is going to be an ordeal. So the Friday morning. They were going on sale at 8 o'clock, and I had the previous day I'd been into one of our big chains, so a bit like Best Buy, called PC World and Currys, and I went into there and said, "Look, are you going to have any iPads tomorrow?" And they said, "Yes, we've got 180 of them." Okay, I said, "Okay, I will come and queue." So I thought, well, I get there, I'm prepared to queue for an hour, so I got there just before 7. And as I was driving into the to the big parking lot, I was looking for the queue, and I couldn't see a queue. There was no queue. And I thought maybe they're around the side or out the back. And anyway, I drove in. There was 10 cars, eight cars, and basically there were 2 other people in front of me. One was sitting in his car with sandwiches and a flask, and he'd actually been there since 4 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And he said he was just he was the reason he got there at 4 o'clock in the morning. He was just wide awake because he didn't want to oversleep, miss the alarm clock. And in the end, he thought I might as well get up. So he made himself some sandwiches and a flask of coffee and went and sat there since 4. And I got there, say at 5 to 7. Somebody had just driven in before me, so there were 3 of us basically until 5 to 8 when the queue expanded tremendously to 11 people. And when they opened the doors of the shop, they didn't open until about 10 past or quarter past. I think they were hoping that the queue would get better, the line would get bigger. And inside they'd stacked all these printer boxes in a sort of a zigzag shape, so they could probably queue 100 people, 150 people. And so the 11 of us just walked in straight to the front. There were 10 members of staff. Okay. And wow. I had no problem being third in the in the line to get the 2 I wanted, and they were limiting it to 2 per person.
Right.
So I said, well, can I just go round again because you've got lots, and they didn't particularly like that idea. But interestingly, they were still in stock. On the Monday,
right?
I went into a big department store, John Lewis. It's probably the premier store in here. So I don't know what would be the equivalent in the US, but
Best Buy.
And I a big like Macy's. That type
Macy's.
Of
Macy's.
Big type of department store, and they. And I went. When did I go in there? I went in there on the Sunday afternoon. Mm-hmm. They still had lots in stock, and basically, I haven't heard of anybody who couldn't get one. Now, What I can't decide is this because there's, lack of demand, and according to what Apple is saying, that doesn't seem to be the case, or is it because they got their act together, and rather than just giving 20 to each store, they gave every store 180 or 200?
I would say it's the latter. I think they ramped production up. They did a great job. I saw a report yesterday that said 6% of all the iPads are the new iPad already within a week.
Right.
So 6% seems to be a pretty big number for already having that many in the field. Now I went to the Apple Store Saturday, a week ago, which I think was I don't remember what day it was, day 2 or 3, and
day two,
and they told me they had in excess of 400 units, and this was a very popular Apple Store. So I think they hit the delivery right on this one. So they ramped up in the beginning, got plenty of units. They don't have anyone waiting in line. We saw that the 450 were waiting at the Tokyo store. I think you said you did not go to London, right? There was a report for some folks waiting in line in London.
Right. No, I didn't. I didn't go up to London. But the other interesting thing is, I spoke to the 4 or 5 people sort of at the front of the of the line with me, and they were all new iPad buyers.
Right.
All of them. They didn't have an existing iPad, and I was buying, for my kids who are new iPad owners, and I haven't yet found anybody who has upgraded
from a 2. Okay, yeah. Well, let me ask you this. So I don't know if you saw just in the last few days, a week ago. Well, I guess early in the week, we saw some reports of the thing getting warm, overheating in the A5X chip area. That it was overheating. Well, overheating it actually was 10 degrees more than the iPad 2. Not a huge deal. Some of our MacBook Pros get very warm on your lap. I don't see where that's a huge deal. But I do think this is a huge deal. Have you seen the reports in the last 2 days about the battery and the battery indicator essentially lying to you? Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen that.
Okay, so here's the thing. We'll go to this cut right here, and so I wanted to ask you, since you do indeed have a few of them, but the indicator on the iPad is a liar, according to some of the research here. Now, this is very interesting. You notice that this says 89% charged. There is something. We'll come back to this in a second, but there is the software in iOS. If you remember, iPhone 4S users have complained about the battery life, and the battery life being very, very short. So Apple says, we're working on it. There was even a jailbreak hack before Apple released the most recent version of iOS that promised for $3.99, you get this app on the jailbreak side, and it will solve your iPhone 4S battery issues. Well, a week into that, even after being referred by some very high-end and well-known websites, it found out that it was just a hoax, that people were paying $4 for nothing. It didn't do anything. Okay, so here's what I would like to kind of rewind our minds back to. Remember when we had the iPhone that you held in your hand, and it was antenna gate, right?
Right. Yeah.
And Apple said there are no problems with it. It's just a normal way of holding it. I physically experienced doing it by holding it and connecting the 2 bars together with the capacitance, I guess, of my skin, and watching the bars go from 5 down to 1. So I know it was a true thing, not anything that was a conspiracy. It definitely was. Well, what did Apple do? Do you remember what they did? Do you remember what they did to fix the problem?
Free bumpers.
Okay, well, free bumpers was the first thing, but what they did in software, I'll help you remember, they increased the algorithm of the LED indicators, so it always showed more. They took the sliding scale and they moved it up. So when you put your hand on it,
they said it wasn't showing correctly.
That's exactly right. They said it was not showing correctly. That's right. So what they did was they moved the bar, if you will, up. So when you had 5 bars before, you really would have something like, 8 or 10 or 9, 8, 9, 10 bars, which you couldn't see, obviously, because there's only 5 on the phone. But then when you put your hand on it, the bars wouldn't necessarily come down, but your signal would come down, and all of a sudden it would stay at 4 or 5, even with your hand on it. Pretty smart guys, but it never did anything. It never did anything. Okay, so just 2 weeks ago, we had a large uproar about AT&T here in the States doing an upgrade, and the 3G logo changing from 3G to 4G.
Right.
And it was just a software update. So people were getting, doing their update and saying, "Wow, my iPhone now has 4G." When in reality, the only thing they had was a 4 in the place of the 3 and no changes. Now, I did test this last week. And on my father's phone, he showed it to me. He said, I've got this logo on 4G. He's a pretty smart guy, so he wasn't fooled by it. I went directly to the speedtest.den app, which I installed on his phone. I've had it on my phone forever. And I laid mine down on the table. We were eating lunch. I laid his down on the table, both of them 4S's, mine a couple of versions before, his brand new, newly updated a day or so before. Speed test, side by side, exactly the same signal location. And the speed was almost identical. So obviously nothing had happened. Okay, so now fast forward to the last couple of days. Guess what? The battery, it appears that from a lot of reports that they are doing the same thing with the sliding scale of the battery indicator. Okay, so they said, we'll fix the battery problem on your 4S, and of course, obviously, when the new iPad comes out, the battery indicator will be solved. The battery will be fine. We're optimizing the battery. Well, what people are finding out now is that they're not optimizing the battery; they're changing the algorithm in the way the software reads the battery indicator. So your battery looks like it's staying at 100% longer than it is. Well, there's one major problem, and I cannot believe that Apple did not catch this before they did it. And now the repercussions are coming back very, very hard. And I don't know what's going to happen with this, but I will tell you, I think the software is going to change and revert back very soon. But what happens, you know what happens a lot of times in software, when you charge a device and it gets to 100%, the software is intelligent enough to say, please give me a trickle charge. Do not send me all of the milliamps that needed for charge.
Absolutely,
okay,
yeah.
so great. So that's great. That's really good. But if you slide that scale and the software or the hardware says, I'm full, don't charge me anymore, then guess what? If your phone or iPad is at 50%, but it's reading 100%, the charging stops no matter which device you use, whether it's a 1 amp or a 2 amp charger from the iPad or the iPhone, it stops charging. And then you're reading 100%, you go out and you go on to your day, and all of a sudden your battery life lasts even a shorter amount of time, and it jumps from 100 down to 30 within minutes. And I have observed that as well, both on my brother and my father's iPhones. So we don't have the iPad yet, but that is a big controversy. I didn't know if you'd seen that yet, but they're going to have to do something with this, because the charging is actually turning off and is not charging the devices. So you've not seen that.
That's very unusual for a company like Apple to make such an error as that. So that's interesting. So I will look at that. But the other thing that I did is, because we've got an Apple, an iPad 1 and an iPad 2, I put all the 3 iPads next to each other, on a desk, 1, 2, and 3. Put them all with the same background screen. Adjusted the brightness so they were all the same, and from 2 feet away from sort of normal viewing, it is very difficult to tell the difference between any of them. And I think there was a video going around where somebody took an iPad 2 and told everybody it was an iPad 3, and they were saying, "Oh, well, isn't the screen wonderful?" type thing, because they assumed that it was. So it was really interesting doing that. Now, if you put a high definition photograph on them, yes, there is a difference, and the iPad 3 screen is much better. But for the things that I do, which is web browsing, a bit of email, etc. Yes, if you get your magnifying glass out or you get really close to it, the letters are smoother, but it's not really going to make a big difference. So I was sort of disappointed with it, because I was half hoping that I would look at it and I would see that it was so fantastic that I would have to upgrade. But I have that the screen doesn't bother me at all. The camera is very good. I took some 1080 video with it, 1080p video, and it is pretty good. It doesn't do very well in low light. Gets extremely noisy, but you would expect that. So the camera is very good. I just can't imagine using it as a camera though. But that's a different debate.
Right.
But there was one thing that I did like. I liked a lot and worked very well. And that was the dictation.
Oh, yes.
Which you can do. It's got this extra key on the keyboard, which is a microphone. And we just had it on the table, switched it on, and I started talking to it and switched it off, and it came back, and it was perfect. Now, it isn't perfect every time, so you do have to go and check it. But basically, it does a pretty good job. So that was impressive, and still not enough to make me go out and buy one. But
right.
I thought that was almost a better feature than the new screen.
Right. Well, so I may pick one up. I don't know. I've not. That's one of the first devices I believe that Apple's released that I haven't gotten a new release right as soon as it was out. Not because of fanboy. I just think it's a great great device.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. That is absolutely the thing to be aware of. I mean, I tend to, like you, I don't get all of them, but I have got quite a few of them. But I think if you're buying you haven't got an iPad, that your first iPad, whether it was a 1 or a 2 or a 3, is absolutely fantastic. And I was telling the people in the line in front of me, and behind me that were getting them, and I said, you're going to have a fantastic time, and you are really going to enjoy it.
Right. So one of the other things that just caught my eye this week, Mark, was how do you feel about high-end audio cables? What's your opinion of audio and video cables? How do you feel about paying, say, $100 for an HDMI cable? What do you think about that?
I think there is a difference between cables. I think if you buy a really, really cheap cable, the plugs aren't good, the soldering isn't good necessarily, and don't do that. So don't pay $2 for a cable, pay $5 for a cable. I have done it probably as you have, and I bought these oxygen-free, super-duper monster cables for something or other, and I think that you're fooling yourself, to be honest.
So having said that, what do you think about this report that audiophiles, who's supposed to have some of the best trained ears around listening to audio and critiquing things, this week couldn't tell the difference between monster cable and coat hangers?
Yes, I hadn't seen this.
Okay, so do we spend $100 for some audio cables, or just get some coat hangers out of the closet and hook it up? 1,000 speaker cables and plain old coat hangers.
Now there is if you're running high power amplifiers, you do need thick cables, etc., but that doesn't necessarily mean expensive cables.
How much thicker can you get than a coat hanger, Mark? I mean,
no, that's right. Well, that's good. That's why it works well, right?
You could probably run 300 amp. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you can. I mean, I have seen some people run what we call bell wire, which is they use for wiring up your doorbell. It's very thin copper wire, and I've actually seen people put mains down these things, and run up additional sockets. So, and it just gets warm and eventually melts or starts a fire. But, you do have to get the appropriate cables. So I would say avoid cheap cables. And we've had experience here of HDMI cables. We use a lot of cables. We have a big drawer full of cables. And we have some go defective, and it tends to be the cheaper cables that become defective. And it not necessarily the cable that goes; it's the connectors. It's the quality of the connector, and of the joints that have been made.
So how about this report where they say that the monster cable, the stands that they do are actually rigged? Upon further inspection, the difference in picture quality wasn't due to gold plating or fancy braiding. You just mentioned that. But rather the use of composite cables on the non-monster TV. So they're actually taking a high-def signal and putting it on one TV, and then taking a low-resolution signal and putting it on another TV and saying, look at what our cables do to the signal. And I just think that's dishonest, and I agree with you completely. If you get a $2 cable and expect it to run, 10 meters, and there's just no way that they can buy the copper or the braiding, the grounding, and everything to go in that cable. But midline cables, manufactured well, typically do as well as gold-plated, oxygen-free, high braid. Has been my experience, and I've had some acquaintances that will only buy the most expensive cables because they essentially have been brainwashed, in my opinion, to think that these cables are a lot better. And I find it interesting when there are reports out like this, but I do not like the ethics of someone setting up a stand and having two different, even if it's for exaggeration, to show this is the way your TV could look, this is the way it probably looks now, which may be what their argument is. They may say, well, most people are running composite cables, and they're running a standard def signal, but I think it's very unfair to run a high def, widescreen, HDMI, Rev 4 signal and have something beside of it that's not. It's not that way. I don't think that's good at all. So, but anyway, that was something that just that just caught my eye this week as well. We won't talk very much about this at all. But I don't know. We talk about 3D printers and we talk about things. I'm not going to play this video, but did you happen to see this at all? Where this guy has a and like I say, I'm not going to play this. I thought I could. I guess I can't scrub through it in full. There we go. I'm not going to play it. But so this guy sits down to get his hair cut, which I do a lot, and this robot is actually cutting his hair. Now he did this for charity. This is for a
very brave man. Very brave.
Yeah, this is for St. Baldrick. So it was a good good cause. They give money. They sell the hair and they make wigs and give it to kids that are are in need of medical stuff. But so he was sitting there, and it actually, the headline said that the robot did all of the hair cutting. Now, you can kind of see here that it doesn't look like the absolute best. Now, there's also there's this robotic assistant over here that's kind of coaching him through it, saying, oh, this is not too bad, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it really turns out to be a pretty horrible haircut, to be honest with you. But the other thing that didn't make a lot of sense, you can see that the device is actually shown. You can see this as like a virtual reality or an augmented reality, where there are cameras that show the guy's head, and there's actually an operator running the robot, very similar to the way they do laparoscopic surgery, where the surgeon is remote. Now, of course, as a little bit of humor towards the end, they got a robot to actually vacuum up the hair, and but the bottom line was that I didn't think the haircut at the very end, the haircut kind of looked butchered up to me. I mean, it looked kind of rough. But anyway, we always try to put something fun and whimsical. But I just don't want the guy that's running that hair cutting apparatus where he's got the joysticks, and because you've seen laparoscopic surgery where the doctors are in another room or even on another country, and they're tying sutures inside of someone after they've done delicate surgery and everything. This was very similar to it, but the guy was in another room looking at it through the camera and doing this thing. And then when I get finished with the haircut, I'm like, I do not want this guy being one of the surgeons that works on me remotely, because there's just no way he could have done it. And of course, look, we always look at these things that are are fun and funny to deal with. But the robotic, hey, I don't really have to worry about the haircuts you do.
I'm not going to give it a try.
But you're not. Okay, so you'll give it a few years until the cars start flying and technology advances a little bit. Then you'll.
Now, I thought we were probably going to talk about the Birdman video, the hoax. Did you see that?
Did, yes, and
it was. I mean, everybody has been talking about it, and it's not worth showing it or whatever. But to me, it was so obviously a hoax, and yet you had these fairly learned people saying, "Well, it might be possible," and what have you. And it was. I thought it was just interesting about how yet again, something went viral on the internet and was reported in various bits of media. It was
similar to that. I don't know if you saw a few years back. There was a group that had a slide on a cliff or a mountainside. They had a slide, and they strapped this guy up in some protective gear, and he had a helmet on, and he flies down this slide, and he gets to the end of the slide, and it kicks him up, and he goes. It looks like it's 50 to 100 meters or so. I mean, just long ways, and he ends up in a small little kiddie swimming pool of water, and when he hits it, the water displaces and splashes out, and the guy gets up and and says, "Yay!" Like he's all done, and it went viral as well on YouTube. Did you see that video?
No, I didn't.
Okay, well, you'll have to look that one up, because it's really, I mean, when you watch it, you can watch it over and over and over and over. And the exact same thing was, don't believe everything you see, because it was created, and they showed you how they created it with computer graphics, animation, and they showed the arc that they had to do to get the video to make the guy look like. But I'm telling you, it is really incredible watching it, even playing in slow motion, watching it and seeing. But so many things today, whether it's photographs, whether it's videos, or even information on the internet, and you have to be careful and double, triple check everything before you say exactly what it is. So.
Yeah, so if anybody watching hasn't seen the Birdman, I'm sure they probably have, but it was a guy who basically had, was trying to tell us that he had cracked, flight, and he strapped on these wings and started, running down, and then you saw him flying in the air, and then there was pictures of it from above, and it was an impressive video. I mean, you have to give it that, but if he had really done that, I don't think we would have seen it on YouTube. It would have been on the main news channels, and it was just a little bit too good, I think. But no, very, very interesting. And the guy had actually done a hoax before. He had done a previous hoax some years ago, and it really just an experiment in seeing how people react and how viral these things can be. So it's always entertaining looking around on YouTube.
I agree completely. Well, Mark, as always, we are running out of time, and it's very unfortunate because we have a lot more stuff to talk about. We'll just have to get to it next week. But I do appreciate you joining, and hope that you will come back very, very soon, and that we do this every week. Now, we also do Studio Tech Live, which is on Friday. We broadcast that live at studiotech.tv, and that's at 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. UTC, I guess. And we will be back to the normal time this week, I believe. We've been doing 3 p.m. Eastern because of some time change differences, but I believe this coming Friday we will be back at 7 p.m. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's 7 p.m. UK. and our clocks are changing this weekend, so we'll be back in sync. So we won't be on what we call a GMT, of course, or UTC. We'll be plus one for summertime, but it's 2 p.m. Eastern and 7 p.m. UK, and that is good fun. And you can check out some of the other shows we do as well by looking at www.ttfn.tv. So I have really enjoyed it, as always, Vance. It's nice to be talking more general tech stuff, and I think we're going to be in a few weeks, probably in 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to be doing this show live as well, and that will be fun, and I look forward to that. So thanks for inviting me yet again.
Well, exactly right. We will be doing this live. We'll have the chat room open, so you guys look forward to joining us probably on Wednesdays, but we will keep you posted via Twitter. So thanks for watching, and we will certainly see you guys soon.